Hi everyone. In this video we'll go over how to import a 3D notch block, animate it and grade it. Let's dive in. To be able to load and play notch blocks, you will need a Scratch or LiveFX Studio license. If you are a LiveFX Studio owner, all you have to do is switch the toolset down here to Finishing, which will give you the same toolset as a Scratch license would. Also, you need to have a Notch playback license, which you can obtain from the Notch website. Let's load a notch block. If you're working on a system which does not have the strongest hardware, you can of course also load a Notch LC file, but that obviously won't give you the interactivity a notch block provides. Loading a block for the first time can take a minute depending on the complexity of the block. Once loaded, drop it into the timeline and enter color effects. To navigate in the viewport, hold Alt and drag up and down to zoom, and space drag to pan the image around. Down here on the left we have all sorts of tools to decide framing, color and more. Let's start here in the Notch menu. It contains all the parameters which the notch block exposes to us. Which parameters are exposed is being decided when exporting the notch block out of Notch Builder. This block here only features the camera parameters, but actually it could expose parameters for anything in the scene, from the position of the chair over there to the color of the lights. And we can of course animate all of them with keyframes as we please. To show you how to create an animation using keyframes, let's animate a nice dolly move with the camera using its position and rotation parameters. To do so, let's first enable Auto Key and position our camera the way we want at the beginning of our animation. Cool. As you can see, a little keyframe has been created for the changed parameters here on the mini timeline. Now we can scrub forward and move the camera to the end position. Here's the dolly move along the Z-axis. And let's also pan the camera to the right. Like that. Note that you can also enable Use Shot Camera here, which will gray out the camera controls of the notch block. Now the virtual camera of the notch block is being controlled by the Scratch internal camera here in the camera menu. More on that in the next video on QCing notch blocks. By the way, we have a number of super efficient hotkeys when it comes to creating animations and dealing with keyframes. Hotkey H will show you all you need to know. Now that we have created this little animation, we can play it back to see if all looks as expected. If we want to tweak the animation of any parameter, we can either click the Animate button to open up the animation editor, display the channels we want to modify and get to work. Or we can simply drag the Animate button onto the parameter we want to change. For instance, the camera pan. And the animation channel pops up, nicely framed and ready to be modified. Same in here, Alt drag zooms, space drag pans, so we can focus on specific parts of the animation curve. We can now for instance smoothen out the keyframes a little for a softer ease in and ease out. Or start the pan movement a little later in time, and also not go all the way to 90 degrees, but just a little less. Holding down X and Y will lock your movement on the corresponding axis, and shift-clicking a keyframe will open up the calculator to punch in a value. Hit the Animate button to exit the animation editor. This, however, is not the only thing we can do with this block. It also features a number of inputs. These are listed here in the Inputs menu. To quickly demonstrate this, let me right-click, fetch a clip from another timeline that I have prepared in my project, and drop it in here. We could of course also import it straight from disk via the right-click menu. That same menu also allows me to just pull up a color frame. Let's drop that in here to keep the background of the moon stage completely black. Inputs can not only be clips, logos or single frames, but even plugins can be dropped in here. Open the plugin browser and choose a plugin that creates a texture, like this one which simulates clouds. Hold Alt and double-click the plugin. It is now attached to your cursor, just like the clip before, and you can drop it into an input field. By the time we're working with multiple inputs, we should probably take a look at our node tree. Swipe right to bring up the version stack, and change to the Node Tree tab at the bottom. Here we can see the notch block node at the top and the 3 input shots feeding into it. Same as everywhere else in Scratch, Alt drag to zoom and space drag to pan around. We can now work on each input node directly by selecting it in the node tree. Let's work on the clip we just imported, and that's showing on the big screen. As you can see, the node menu changed its label from Notch to Red Raw, as this clip is actually a Red Raw file. Let's put a quick grade on here. Back to our Notch block node. There's our clip with the grade on it. We can lock the viewport to this node by enabling the lock icon down here. This way I can conveniently change the color frame into color bars whilst looking at the entire scene in context. Nice. And of course, I can also animate and grade the texture of my plugin node down here. If I now wanted to have the same content on the other TV screen here, I can just select my Notch block node again, go to the input menu for the corresponding screen, grab the Cloud plugin node from the node tree and drop it in here. Done. Lastly, let's also add a grade to our scene, or the Notch block node so to speak. If you swipe left, you can bring up the layer stack and add layers to the selected node. So let me add some contrast on this layer and make the scene cold and moody. Done. We can add more layers, which can again contain keyers, plugins, textures, and really anything thinkable. Most of what we can do in here will still play real time. You can always check against by pressing Ctrl F1 to bring up the performance monitor. Another great feature in Scratch is the versioning. Let's say we want to try something different, or the client asks us to go a different direction. Using the version stack on the right, we can simply create a version of our shot and now either reset the grade or continue to tweak it. Let's just change the grade a little by desaturating the scene. If we now want to compare the two, we can simply press D on our keyboard for dual view or S for split view and drop the other version into the right side of the viewport. We can now scrub back and forth or play the scene whilst moving the white bar to the left and right, or up and down. For rendering out later on, it's important to know that the version at the bottom will be the one that gets rendered out. So if we wanted our original version to be rendered out, we would just grab it here and drop it below. Done. If we quickly switch to the Construct tab, we can also see our version here in the corresponding slot. To differentiate them a little bit better, we can also add color nodes to our shots. Like this. Of course, we cannot only work on a single notch block per project, but we can load multiple shots and even mix them with traditional camera footage in a timeline, creating the final master. In the next video, we'll look at QCing notch blocks, color management, and outputting them live to the big screen. See you there.